I love the American Government class in Challenge 1 because we dive into those original documents and really start to understand how this great nation was formed. So a couple of resources that you will need. You'll need the Words Aptly Spoken American Documents book. And if you have the history timeline cards from Foundations, you'll find those very helpful. So each week you will be assigned a historical time period as well as a primary document to annotate. What you want to do first is read for historical context. So you'll notice in your challenge guide that the numbers for the associated history timeline cards will be listed there. And that's a great way really just to set the stage for what we're going to be studying. In addition, there will be some secondary sources listed there that include speeches and poems and essays also written in that time period, just again so that you can set the stage. From your reading, you'll want to pull out a few people and events to include on your timeline. And you can do this at home simply just by drawing a vertical line down a piece of paper, putting the date on one side, the people and the event on the other. But we'll be discussing those in class. So if you do that work ahead of time, then when we come together, we can create a class timeline as well. This again is just helping you to get a framework for the time period and what it was really like. Now we get into the meat of this seminar. Each week you are going to annotate a primary document, a document that describes the shaping of American government. So, what does the word annotate mean? Good news, annotate simply means to provide explanatory notes for the document. So remember, a lot of these documents were written a long time ago. They use words we don't recognize. They use language structures we don't recognize. And many of these documents are obsolete. They're not still being used today. So we have to do a little bit of extra digging to really understand what they mean. So how can we annotate a document? You'll want to look in the back of your challenge guide starting on page 224, and there are lots of examples of things that you can annotate. But just keep in mind some of the skills we've already learned. You may want to jot down the people mentioned in the document or the places. What are the key ideas? In fact, I encourage students to take one paragraph at a time and put the key idea from that paragraph in the margin. What are some of the themes that are running through this document? Are there themes of freedom? Are there themes of justice? Are there themes of economics? What is leading people to make the decisions that they're making? Again, there will be unfamiliar terms, so circle those or highlight those and jot down the definition in the margin. And you may want to highlight a few quotes. Now you'll notice that I have a color code there. That is how I study best. I highlight everything and then write my notes off to the side. So that's up to you, but somehow you want to find your system for annotating a document. When you come to class, we are going to talk about the historical context. We are going to create a class timeline, but most importantly, we're going to discuss this document. What is significant about this document? How did it shape American government? Why is it still used or not used today? And what were the impacts of this document? Then when you go home, you're going to summarize that document. And this can take on a lot of different shapes and forms. Again, there are examples in the back of your challenge guide, so check those out and work together with your parent so that you are very clear on what their expectations are for you. In my home, I ask my students to write a long paragraph. So they're going to open by setting the historical context for the time period. Then they're going to tell me the what and why of the document. What is included? Why is it included? And then finally, they'll conclude with what is the impact. So again, a long paragraph is what I'm looking for. My students typically type that on the computer and submit it that way to me through Google Docs, but you could also do this in a notebook. Some people prefer a more simplified version, so they just want bullet points. Whatever you decide with your parent, that's what the expectation is. But I do want you to know that at the end of the semester, you are going to be able to bring in all of your summaries from the entire semester. And for the Blue Book exam, you're going to draw a topic and you will have 2 minutes to prepare a 5-minute speech on that document. So any notes that you have that you've written down, you get to use those. So there's one more important piece to the American Government class, and that is we're going to memorize some important stuff. If you have already done foundations, you may have memorized some of these things, but there are 4 key recitations that we're going to do in Challenge 1. So the first is the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Then we're going to recite the preamble to the Constitution, then the U.S. presidents, and finally, the simplified outline of the United States Constitution. So you'll be given 3 weeks to memorize each one of those, and then we'll recite them together in class. So if you're feeling right now like, wow, there are a lot of moving pieces to American government, you're not wrong. There are a lot of moving pieces, but there's also a rhythm. And as you get into that rhythm, it'll start to make a lot more sense. So how do we assess American government? In my home, we are assessing the notes in the timeline, the summaries, the recitations, and the Blue Book exam. So the reading for context and taking notes on those things, the timeline and the annotation, those each earn 10 points. And then the summary of that particular time period and document earn 20. We will also have recitations, which can earn points. And then at the end of the semester, we talked about that Blue Book exam. So part of that Blue Book exam will be a speech that you will give. And the other part of it will be a test on the U.S. Constitution and American government. And just so you know, that is a requirement for Illinois State, is that students must pass the U.S. Constitution test.